All right, all right, all right. Money is on my mind. Yes, you guys. This is Darrin Harvey, and this is Financial State of Mind, the show where I help you get to that bag, manage that bag, and grow that bag as best as possible as we talk personal finance and anything and everything to do with the almighty power of the dollar. And today we are here again with another very special guest. We have Jocelyn in the building. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for asking, Darrin.
Thank you again. Thank you for coming in. You're here at KGPC 96.9 FM, streaming right now, kgpc969.org, and all your favorite streaming platforms of choice. So on today's topic, we are going to be talking about long-term care, why it's important to talk about it, to plan for it, to discuss it, and leading into your twilight years as a senior citizen. Jocelyn, would you like to explain to the audience what you do?
Sure. So my name is Jocelyn Jasper, and I am the owner of Lynn's Senior Placement Agency. We specialize in placing senior citizens into long-term care facilities, and this is a free service to the family. We specialize in the Contra Costa area, Alameda, and we can actually place out of state as well.
Oh, wow. Nice. So you specialize in Contra Costa, but you can place people anywhere in the country?
Correct.
Nice.
Yes.
So how'd you get into that? Why'd you decide to get into that?
I was kind of born into it. My grandmother, she had boarding care facilities, but also I was her caregiver. I also cared for my mother up until she passed away at the young age of 45. My father passed away maybe a year and a half ago at the age of 56. We're all diabetics. So, I'm used to this. My younger brother passed away and all of my grandparents passed away. This is something that I'm acclimated to. So when you get to a certain point, it's like, maybe I should start educating myself so that I don't put myself in this same boat. Hopefully we're going to age and it's guaranteed that we're going to die. So I was just honored to be invited onto this podcast to talk about the financial steps that we need to take to prevent these types of things from happening, or at least to be in a bad financial situation.
Absolutely. Longtime listeners know this, but new listeners can learn that you have a very similar background as me. My parents passed away young, one through Alzheimer's, and that was my dad. He passed away a day before 65, and I was his caregiver. As I explained in previous episodes, my mom passed away of cancer at 54, and then my brother passed away at age 31. This is something that happens to people. It's not totally uncommon for this to happen. That's why I got into it. Something that is talked about in a lot of cultures. There's a lot of cultures that is just kind of hush-hush about it, and I do really feel it's important to have that discussion and to, most importantly, lead to a plan. So from your experience when it comes to placements, do you specialize in a certain type of senior placement? Is it like people with Alzheimer's? Is it just people who are just getting elderly? Kind of who's your typical client?
So all seniors, even if you don't have any health ailments, because a lot of these facilities, there's three parts. There's the independent living, there's the assisted living, and then there's the memory care, which is oftentimes with people that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. Some people, they just want to get rid of all of their bills and they want to move into an independent living facility, and God forbid something were to happen to them, maybe they take a fall, then that's when the levels of care start coming and it becomes assisted. So it definitely provides them with not only community, but you don't have to wait for something bad to happen to be proactive, to start looking into these communities.
And for the listeners who may not know, can you explain the difference between the three that you just mentioned?
Sure. So independent, I'm sure you guys have probably seen like 55 and older communities. You can move in at 55, 60 if you want, no health ailments, not taking any medication, but you don't want to pay that mortgage and that car note and PG&E and utilities. When you move into this type of facility, they take care of all of that for you, minus the car note, but all of those things are already there for you, like I said, including the community and the different elements that they offer. If something were to happen to you, like God forbid you were to have a stroke or have a terrible fall and you need help, then that's where they start adding assistance to it. Say, hey, you may need some help with ADLs, which is assisted daily living. And maybe you need help getting around or taking a shower or clothing yourself, things like that. Being in one community can help with all of these different things. As we continue to age in place, Alzheimer's is really common, especially in our culture. If that becomes a view, then they have the memory care side as well. So there's so many different communities and so many different options. And I just feel like with our community, it's best to educate people on what the options are. It's not just your average old folks' homes. They've actually advanced.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember before I decided to place my father in the care of friends and family, I did tour many different options and facilities. And this is back in 2019. And some of these facilities are like real nice, like, hey, I'm 30-something and I wouldn't mind living there. Like, man. So for those, again, who just have no idea, explain what a typical facility offers to a loved one if they were to decide to go into one of them.
That's a good question, but it really depends on your loved one, right? So there's the bigger facilities, right? And oftentimes they have many residents in them. And then you have your smaller facilities that we should definitely not sleep on. And they are the residential care homes, and they usually hold up to 6 residents. So it really depends on the type of level of care that your loved one needs and where they feel most comfortable. Some people feel more comfortable in the smaller residential care homes. For example, my grandmother, when she had Alzheimer's dementia, she didn't want to be in a big facility. We put her in the smaller facility because she was a wanderer, right? And she needed more one-on-one attention. So when it comes down to the ratio of caregivers to residents, it was smaller, and that's what she needed. But a lot of people, they prefer the bigger facilities because they want community. Maybe they're not up to that level where they need all of that personal attention, but it's definitely an option. So it really depends on your loved ones, what their needs are, and where they feel most comfortable.
Got it. And I understand. And I agree, listeners. It was the same thing with me. I did work with someone when I was with my dad, and she was an amazing lady. She really was there. It's not just like Jocelyn's going to be over here and be like, all right, here's your options, dump you off to the person, that's it. My experience with the lady was like, she was dang near like a consultant, like a counselor, very empathetic, very understanding of the situation, and very much gave me the education. What I liked about it was there seemed to be no pressure on where I made the placement, where the choice was. It was just more as long as I made a decision, that was kind of her job. So you mentioned it's free for the family. So how is it free? People are wondering, I was wondering, how is this a free service? How am I not cutting you a check for this? Because in my experience, the lady was putting in hours. So how can you make this free for the people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's a complimentary service to the family. I'm contracted with the facility that they get placed into. The facility pays me a percentage of the first month's rent. So on the other hand, I'm a real estate agent. It's very similar to when you're trying to buy a house and you're touring. It's free to tour. When you're ready to purchase that house, typically the seller pays my commission, right? It's almost like the same concept. So I don't mind driving around to different facilities because in actuality, at the end of the day, our main goal is to keep your loved one in their house because that's where they feel most comfortable. That's their familiar place. But when it comes down to it, when family can no longer care for them and the care is just too much and you are put into a position to where you have to contact me, then that's what I'm here for. So I just wanted to let everybody know that there's a misconception of people like myself trying to just move everybody into these old folks' homes, and that's not the case. Our ultimate goal is to keep them at home, even if that means me reaching and, getting into my resources and my contacts and helping you guys get that 20 free hours of caregiving services through some of my affiliates, because at the end of the day, we want what's best for your loved one. But yes, it is a completely free service to the family. I get paid from the community that they move into as a referral fee.
Perfect. Love it. One thing you just mentioned earlier is we want to keep our loved ones at home. Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that, we want to keep our loved ones at home compared to just at the first moments dumping them off somewhere else?
Well, there's a few different reasons. Culturally, right? We have a stigma of I'm not sending my parents or my grandparents to a nursing home. And so I think it's a huge stigma in the African American culture as well as the Filipino culture because we were brought up to take care of our own. However, with inflation these days, it's hard. I don't want my kids taking care of me. I want to keep my dignity. And so I think it's really safe to keep them at home because, again, that's where they feel most comfortable. But when it becomes unsafe and they don't have the proper care, at that point, we need to start looking into our options.
Understood. And I 100% agree with you. So when you say it becomes from safe to unsafe, typically, what does that look like?
Oh, man, that's so cool because I actually went through this situation with my grandmother who was an RN before she passed away. And that made me so mad because she knew what she wasn't supposed to be doing, right?
Yep. Yep.
So between me and 4 other family members, my cousin, my auntie, my dad, my brother, and then, of course, my other cousin, we were all taking shifts to take care of her. So everybody's care plan wasn't the same. As a diabetic myself, I know she's a diabetic, so I'm feeding her what she needs to be fed. But then when my cousin comes on board, he's over here bringing Popeyes. So there's no consistency. We're not professional caregivers. So all 5 of us were on different plans. Nothing was consistent. And very similar to children, they need a routine. Right? When it came to the point where we weren't able to take proper care of her or the next person was late and then that made me late to work, it really wasn't working. And we got into a position to where we were actually doing my grandmother a disservice by not giving her the consistency and the expertise that she needed. And she knew what she needed because she's an RN.
Right.
But she just wanted to keep getting that Popeye snuck to her, you know? So at that point,
relatable.
So at that point, it was like, hey, this is what's going to be best for her. Have that conversation with her, and that's the move that we had to make.
Got it. And so you did have that conversation with your grandma, and she okayed it, it sounds like.
Not the first 3 times she didn't, because she's like, this is my home. I want to stay here. And I said, you know what? Then we're going to make it happen. We're going to come together as a family. And then bills started getting high, and people were stuck in traffic to relieve the other person of their shift. And that's when a mess came out of it. And then we would continuously talk to her. And then she actually said, hey, maybe this is what we should do because it was the inconsistency. And again, I just feel like she's worked so hard all of her life. She deserves the proper care and she knows what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Whew, this is, oh, man. Yeah, that's it. It's incredible how different and similar experiences can be when it just comes to caring with somebody who's getting up there in their years. Even though I was different, it was just me. I was the one primarily caring for my dad. There wasn't really no other help, but it didn't matter. I hired people to assist me, to relieve me because I had to go to work and stuff like that. And like you said, people get in traffic, schedules get mixed up, people are on different pages. Sometimes hire somebody. They may not necessarily be on the same page as you. They may not have the same beliefs as you, so they may do stuff differently. It doesn't matter if it's somebody who is willing to come into the house or your family. Sometimes just the actual location is not set up to take care of a loved one properly, and that's a benefit of these facilities. Like, they actually have the infrastructure to support this level of care, and that's why I think it is important for families and people to consider these options. So how long have you been doing this right now at this point? Helping people find placements?
I just reopened my placement agency in February of this year, but prior to that, I have had it for a few years. I actually closed it down when the pandemic started because people were pulling their parents and their grandparents out of the facilities because COVID, the seniors were the target of COVID, so it made no sense for me to try to put them back into these facilities. People were bringing their loved ones home. And so for me, having values and morals, I'm like, you know what? There's just not a need for this, and I don't want to go against the grain, so I'm going to shut it down. And then years later, just this February, I decided to reopen it, and I found great success through my own testimony, not just taking care of my grandmother, but also taking care of my mother until she died at the age of 45 years old, which is really young, helping with my dad, who died at 56 just a year and a half ago. So it really hits home. And kind of piggybacking on what I mentioned earlier with my grandmother, one thing, she was really embarrassed when we had to help her with certain things like going to the bathroom because we're her family. and she wants her dignity. And so a lot of times she would hide certain accidents because she didn't want us to see that part of her, because that was our hero.
Right.
That was our hero, you know, but just kind of going through life experiences really made me pick this back up. It's really a purpose for me.
Yeah, I totally relate. It was very similar with my dad. He really, you know, especially men, it could be rough. There's a lot of moments I remember in particular caring for my dad. One of the biggest moments was taking away his car keys. And it was so hard for him to understand why I was doing it. My dad had never, and he was proud of it, he had never gotten like a ticket or like anything. He was like what we call a perfect driver. He went his entire adulthood not getting a ticket, not getting arrested, nothing like that. So when I had to take his keys, he was at a point in his Alzheimer's where he couldn't comprehend why it was important. And I remember it was rough. It was rough. He was depressed. He was sad about it. He would literally just go to his truck and he would just sit in there and just listen to music. And it was difficult. So that was one moment I remember dealing with my dad. So one thing I'm a proponent of is having these discussions with your loved ones before it gets to that point. And I typically like to document it with healthcare directives. Is that something that you typically assist your clients with, or not really healthcare directives?
I have resources that can help them with that, because I don't like to talk about things that I'm not the expert on. I know a little bit about everything, and that's why I have so many different affiliates that can dig deeper into that. So definitely. But one thing I wanted to mention when you were talking about your dad is that I took a class on this because both of my grandmothers had Alzheimer's dementia. So what I learned is that when my grandmother, she would be staring at the DMV book. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm studying for my driving test. I'm like, I know you ain't finna get on the road. But when we took her keys, she had a fit. So we had to replace them with fake keys.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I don't even know where the key, I think there was a keys to the shed, all kind of keys,
Yeah.
right? But she knew she wasn't going to drive anywhere, but we didn't want to take that away because they can get very upset. And then later on, she became a wanderer. So we learned that, and I took a class on this, we had to put black mats in front of every door because they think it's a hole. They think they're going to fall in it, so they don't go to the door. And the last thing I remember, because she passed away 1.5 years ago, is she kept watering one of the plants outside of her home. And my grandfather loved to plant. He loved flowers, and she was killing all the flowers. So the teacher from the class said, you have to replace them with fake flowers. If you notice, she's only watering this one plant because we don't want to make it seem like we're stripping them of their independence, like they're a child, because they will get really upset, right? They want to maintain that independence, but we just have to know how to navigate around it without getting them upset.
Yeah, I never thought about the black mats.
Either.
Fortunately, that's a good one. I'm going to definitely pass along. Fortunately, my dad had early onset Alzheimer's, so it's normal Alzheimer's, but it just works way quicker, unfortunately. He was not a wanderer, oddly. He never wandered outside of the place he stayed, whether it was my home or at the caregiver's home. He never wandered. He did, go through the whole process, of course, of mainly forgetting what forgetting does. So forgetting everything from forgetting how to cook to forgetting people's names. I remember when he forgot my name. That was not a fun time. He forgot everything. He forgot how to put on his clothes. He forgot everything. So it could be very stressful, very challenging for people. One thing I also like to talk about too is why this is important for not only the person being cared for, but for the family and friends themselves, the caregivers. One thing that I was a part of when I was taking care of my dad was there was an Alzheimer's support caregivers group. And I learned a lot from that. So listeners, one of the big reasons I like to talk about this is, I tell people, there's two stressful things in my life that I experienced, two most stressful things. Number one, going blind. Right behind it, number two, is caring for my dad. Mm-hmm. I've never experienced anything more stressful than caring for my dad. It is incredibly stressful. I'm a big proponent of having the professionals care for a loved one in that case because it takes the stress off of it. And you've experienced it as a caregiver. Explain how stressed you were getting at times when you were caring for your loved ones.
Yeah, so it's a different type of stress when it's your own family because you know them and you have more empathy for them. Like, well, I know my mom really loves Filipino food. And at the end of the day, it's just not the one because it's just
Yeah.
not healthy, right? That's why we all diabetics. And so I feel like with a caregiver, because they're coming from an unbiased standpoint, they're going to do what's good for her. Now, I didn't place my mother. She was young, and I had the honor of taking care of her, and I do not regret it. I'd do it all over again if I could, you know. But just caring for all of my family members, again, it's just coming from that unbiased standpoint. And if you're able to do it and you have the time and the resources and the money, do it. Just do it, you know. But if it's to that point to where you can't and you're even utilizing your children to do so, that's really hard because we're in the sandwich generation and we're trying to take care of our children and our parents at the same time. And that's what causes a lot of mental stress for us. One thing that I really enjoy doing is after I place residents with the communities that I'm affiliated with, I go and I host a paint event for them because I'm also a paint night hostess. I just want to have fun. They just want to have fun. Yeah. This seems like a morbid conversation, but at the end of the day, I was just at a facility yesterday talking to the residents, having fun with them, and I go and I do paint nights with them, you know, because we want to bring that element of fun to them. Yeah. And so if one were to put their loved one in a community, you can go visit every day if you want. Mm-hmm. And then when you get there, they'll be up and ready for a visit. You can stay. You can eat there. I mean, it really gives you the time to go back home and take care of your family without feeling of guilt of, is my loved one being properly taken care of? And they're getting the care that they need, which is the most important part.
Absolutely. And when I had my dad at the caregiver's home, I was visiting them once a week just to check in on my dad and spend time with them and stuff like that. And I did both. I did that while my dad was in his home, me and him living together. And I did that when he was at the caregiver's home. And it was much less stressful dealing with my dad at the caregiver's home compared to when he was living with me. When he was living with me, he would wake up in the middle of the night and he would come to my door and he would literally knock on the door like a kid. And he literally would be like, Darrin, I can't sleep. That's all he would just say. I would take him to his room and try to get him to sleep. I remember I would bring my laptop and pop open the Boondocks cartoon show. And that was the show that we would watch together. And that would help him sleep or at least put him down in the bed. And then I would go back to my room and try to get some sleep. And then there would be nights where that was enough. And there would be nights where he would just wake me up again. And I would have to repeat the cycle over and over again, day in and day out. And man, I was just like, this is like no different than having a baby. There was just no difference. And I don't have any kids myself. I have my girlfriend's son, but I never dealt with a baby. And I was just like, this is crazy. That was one of my turning points of, I can't do this no more. There's no way I can do this by myself day after day, day in, day out. And I share this, listeners, because I want not to scare listeners, but I want listeners to have an understanding of what this looks like. So you have an idea, this is what could happen to myself or a loved one, and this is why it's important to have a plan. One thing I want to talk about is long-term, like how to prepare for it monetarily wise, because I'm sure people have heard how expensive it is. Before I continue, I want to remind listeners, this is Darrin Harvey. We're here with Jocelyn at Financial State of Mind, the show where I help you get to that bag, manage that bag, and grow the bag as best as possible on KGPC 96.9 FM. We are talking about long-term care and placement here with our specialists, and a lot of the reasons why people don't want to have the discussion and plan is they're afraid of the cost. And I don't want to shy away from it. We do know that it's not cheap. This is not a cheap situation. But even though it can go into, in some extreme cases, 5-figure range monthly, there are ways to plan for it so you're not basically draining your entire life savings to care for somebody. So from your point of view, what are some options that people can do to prepare for a loved one monetarily?
Well, there's a few different options. One, which I am just within the last few years I've been put on to and I'm investing in, is long-term care insurance, which is why I was so gravitating towards you, because this is something that you talk about. This is something that you do. I just feel like a lot of minorities are not on to long-term care insurance because they think that your kids is going to take care of you, and that may not be the case.
Right.
But we also want the best for our kids. We want them to go out to college and start families and things like that. We want them to live their best lives, right? So long-term care insurance is definitely a great option. Also, there's military insurance, the VA, if they were ever a service member. And then one thing that a lot of people think is that medical insurance is going to pay for it, and 90% of the time, it's not. Most of these places are private pay. And if I'm being honest, it can go anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000 a month, depending on your loved one's needs and their level of care. So not to break it down too much, but normally how it works is there's room and board, right? Let's just say room and board is $3,000 a month. And then there's many levels of care. So if they don't need that many levels of care, it's not going to be much more than $3,000. But if they need the maximum level of care, then obviously it's going to be more. The facility that you're at, the city that you're in, and the type of level of care that your loved one needs. So when we sit down for a one-on-one consultation, I like to talk about money. Like, let's plan this out. What assets do you have? Do you need to sell your home? Do you have any long-term care insurance, VA benefits? And I will help you pull up the equity in your home. We'll break that out. Let's say you live to be this age, really break it down, and then also give you some wiggle room.
Absolutely. So it's a financial podcast. So, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about money on here. But I always talk about money in a way not to scare people, but to educate them and to motivate them to take action. So my dad did not have long-term care insurance. Mm-hmm. Everything, like you said, was paid out of pocket. I would say from my experience, and it is an extreme experience, we paid the caregivers. It was $9,000 a month for room and board. And for my situation, I had to pay for supplies as well. So there were months where I was paying $10,000 a month. Now, fortunately, my parents had a home. We had very favorable equity, so I was able to draw from the equity of the home, and that's how I was able to pay for my dad. So I was very blessed. But the whole time I was thinking two things. Number one, I didn't know how long my dad was going to be alive, so I didn't know how long I was going to keep needing to pull from the equity of the house because this is expensive. Number two, when I was in the support groups, I was seeing how so many people didn't have that option. And that's another reason why I was like, I learned to be grateful and blessed. But as I got into this position as a financial person, I wanted to see other options. And that's when I learned about long-term care. I didn't even know that was an option when I was going through it. And long-term care is offered in a lot of different ways for the listener. So a common way is offered actually by your job. So your job may be offering it as a benefit right now for a monthly subsidized cost. Another way you can get it is you can just buy it yourself, without an employer's help. And generally speaking, especially if you get it now, if you're younger, it becomes much more affordable. It can come through term care. You can get it through an actual life insurance policy through living benefits. There's a lot of different ways that you can pay for long-term disability insurance or long-term care insurance. And they're not scary amounts of money. This is stuff that, especially if you get it in your younger years, you're paying 2-digit, maybe low 3-digit numbers per month at the high end. Usually it's 2-digit numbers, depending on the policy provider. Mm-hmm. And it covers the extreme, which is the Alzheimer's and the memory clinics, but pretty much universally, 90% of them cover senior citizen, leave-in assistant, service placements. Pretty much all of them are covered under it, or will cover the majority of it under it. Because like you said earlier, and this is a shock that I learned, your traditional healthcare insurance does not cover for this stuff, generally speaking.
Correct.
When I was looking, I didn't find one. I didn't find one facility that covered it through normal health insurance. It was covered. They would take term insurance, people's life insurance policies, or private pay. And that's where I found most people were doing. They were doing private pay. So I want to educate people that there are options, so you're not paying these 4-figure a month bills on your own, and you're not digging into equity, or you're not going into debt with credit cards, which is what a lot of people do. That's what I did. I ended up going into 50 grand into credit card debt on top of the 150 grand that I pulled out of my dad's home for equity, because it was super expensive. Mm-hmm. And if I knew that there was an option 5-10 years previously of my dad just getting on long-term care, that's an option I would have explored. So I definitely want to let people know of that option. They can reach out to me personally. They can DM me. They can go to financialstateofminds.com, and I can refer them to people that I trust. I do want to let people know long-term care is a viable option when it comes to the care of a loved one. And another thing I like to discuss is wills and trust. Having that conversation with your family, preferably beforehand, to create a will and a trust along with the healthcare directive, because there are definitely scenarios I didn't experience, but there's definitely scenarios, and you mentioned this earlier, people have different ideas of how a loved one should be cared. So I feel that the easiest thing to do is have the person tell you how they want to be cared for.
Right.
And hopefully have that conversation before they end up getting sick, which is why I tend to talk about people having healthcare directives. And if they have assets, they create a will and trust. And again, yes, you can go hire an attorney and pay $2,500 to have all this done, or you can just literally do it yourself. There are do-it-yourself software where you can create a will and a trust. And I will say, explore the will and trust option if you have a simple situation or your family has a simple situation. A simple situation, listeners, is, for example, my situation. It was just my dad and me. Pretty simple. It was pretty simple. I'm going to inherit the home. I'm going to inherit all his assets, which was basically a home and his bank accounts. That was it. Simple. A to B. In that scenario, I would highly look into just doing things yourself. But if your loved one or you have a situation where you're going to have multiple properties, multiple assets, or maybe there's multiple beneficiaries that are involved and there's percentages, this person gets 50% of the house, child 2 gets the other 50%, right. Child 3 gets house number 2. That's when you should look into a specialist like an estate planning attorney, and it's worth it. I know $2,000 plus is a lot of money for people, but get the expert involved, because you do not want to go into probate when it comes into your loved one's assets. You do not want to let the courts get involved, because it is not fun and it takes forever and things are just frozen. Things are just frozen, and you may need those things to support yourself after everything is done. So again, have these conversations, make a plan, explore options, get someone like Jocelyn involved to help educate and guide you when that time comes. Because one thing that I learned from my experience, ladies and gentlemen, is you do not want to do this alone. Mm-mm. I have cared for somebody basically alone. Again, other than going blind, stressful situation in my life is to care for this, is to do this on your own. You don't have to do it on your own, even if you are the single child, even if you are the only responsible one. You don't have to do this alone. You can get experts like Jocelyn to help you. You can get counselors involved. You can get a support group involved. And you're going to need to. If you want to come out of a situation like this with some type of sanity, you're going to need to have that support. And this is why we're here. This is why we're having the discussion, is we want to be that support. We want to be hopefully the motivation that gives you guys a reason to have that conversation with your family. So I know we have a little bit of time left. you've been doing this now since February again. You talked a little bit about some of your clients, but just a little bit of a little fun. You mentioned that you have painting events with your clients, and I'm glad you brought that up because I know that some of these centers have like community spaces and they have events and they have things to do. So talk about some of the more positive things you've had or more positive experience you've had helping loved ones find placements.
Sure. So a lot of the communities, they offer many different activities, and I just like to come in and just have fun. I like to come in and say, hey, can I come by 2 weeks from now and maybe get a few residents together and then we do a paint event? Do paint events outside of the communities anyways. So I have the materials. But once I place a loved one, I like to go back and visit. I want to make sure that they're okay. I want to make sure that they look good. I want to make sure that they feel good. And I think the family members really get peace of mind also when they go and they visit. It's not just a place and forget. It's like, hey, I'm going to be stopping by. Just want to text you and let you know that your dad is doing great. Looks like he made a couple of friends, or we really found some activities that he enjoys. Here's a picture of him painting with me, things like that. And just kind of to your point earlier, reach out to me if, you need it in that moment. But I feel like these days we should try to be a little bit more proactive, especially with long-term care insurance. They're going to age. We're going to age. And we're sitting here talking about our loved ones, but we need to be referring to ourselves also because, like you mentioned, the older you get, the more expensive long-term care insurance gets. What about me? I'm 40 years old. I'll never be as young as I am today. So if we do what's easy now, life is going to be harder. If we do what's hard now and have those hard conversations, guess what? Life is going to be easier down the road, and we want to stick around.
Yeah.
So even if you feel like your loved one or yourself is not in that situation yet, it's best to reach out to you, Darrin, and start that long-term care insurance because tomorrow it's going to be more expensive.
Absolutely.
And also, even if you do have a loved one and they have no ailments, if they've never had a stroke or fell down or whatnot, that's okay. Let's start looking into those options. And like I said, if you need help in regards to listing the home, I can do that for you, but that's more of a last resort. We don't want to go there.
Right.
And again, I have different resources for you guys. So even like with Contra Costa Legal Services, they do free wills. It's a team of 6 attorneys. So I have a lot of different resources for people. Even if I'm not able to help you and your loved one in that moment, I'm going to point you guys in the right direction. I promise. And again, today is about getting the information. And so as far as the paint parties go, they love it. And I bring my karaoke and we gets down. I mean, it's a good time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. To get into this business, you legitimately have to like seniors. And I love seniors because they're unfiltered. Like, just go ahead and hurt my feelings. Let's get it out the way. The devil that I know versus the devil that I don't. Y'all ain't got nothing to lose. You're going to be honest with me. And to me, I don't take anything personal. It's funny to me. And so I love them because they're so honest and they're not scared of anything. And they just want to have a good time. And we just want to do karaoke together and paint. And they always say the same thing. I can't even paint a stick figure. I'm like, yeah, nobody can. That's why I'm here. It's just a social event for us to sit down and talk about your life and the things that you've been through. Because I can learn from that. And it's so interesting to see people's walks of life and the things that they did when they were younger and where they were. And I always think to myself, like, man, I'm 40 right now. What was my grandmother doing when she was 40? She already had 5 different houses and these facilities. I'm like, where am I at? And how can I get there, right? Because we want our children to be better than us. How can we set that up? And so oftentimes I'll even allow my children to come because they need perspective as well. So when it comes to like volunteer work at some of these communities, I bring them with me because, again, they need to be around their elders. They need to listen to the types of lives that they've led and where they're at when they were their age. And I have 3 children and they're very just respectable kids. I'm super proud of them, but I try to really expose this lifestyle to them as well because they need to know what it was like. They don't have as much freedom these days because the world has definitely changed, but for them to listen to the stories and volunteer and just kind of have that humbling moment, it really keeps them in check as far as, wow, this is something that I can grow to appreciate and to really build that connection with elders. I think that these days that's what people are missing, especially the young people. There's a disconnect between the young people and the seniors. So I try to bring my whole family into that because with a lot of seniors, their family don't come to visit often. And I hate to say that. But it's true. And that's why I like to make my rounds and make my stops when I do have time. And if that means coming in and painting and doing some karaoke, I'm going to do it.
Absolutely. And you touched on so many points there. One thing you touched on is, we've been talking about our loved ones in a sense of our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, our aunties, and stuff like that. But if you're a listener at our age range or younger, you need to be thinking about this for yourself. Like you mentioned several times, you're going to age. It's going to happen. You're going to age, and unfortunately, you're going to pass on. So we can't prevent that. We can't prevent aging. We can't prevent the end of the circle of life. We can, however, prepare for it. And of course, that's what we've been talking about as we prepare for it. We've been talking about it with the focus of our loved ones, but it is important, like you said, to talk about it for ourselves too, which is a reason why after my dad's experience, the first thing I did is I got a life insurance policy. That's the first thing I did, because when my dad passed away, it was the pandemic, September 2020. So it was already harder because it was a pandemic. There was limited options. Then things were booked up months behind. So there was a lot of looking. But when we found a spot, people there were great. And again, as we know, and I want to bring up, funerals aren't cheap. They're not cheap. Mine was about $20,000. One option that was cool, and I didn't know this until I asked the guy we were talking about payments, is if they know that life insurance is an option, if the loved one who passed had life insurance, they'll take that. They'll literally do the services and they'll get it directly from the life insurance policy holder, as long as you can prove that you had the life insurance. You don't have to come out of pocket that way. They didn't need a down payment. They didn't need anything. They just needed the paperwork, and they'd be like, cool, we know they're going to get our check from them. We can go ahead and do the services. And my dad only got $50,000. That was his life insurance policy. It was $50,000, which I'm not going to say $50,000 is not a lot of money. It is. But after funeral costs, after all the money I spent caring for my dad, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. So most people I know who are listening don't have 6 figures, 7 figures amount of money lying around, which is why I definitely do promote some type of insurance, whether it's life insurance, whether it's long-term care insurance. A lot of life insurances nowadays anyways have something called living benefits. And what are living benefits is when you have a life insurance where you can pull from the equity of the insurance while you're still alive. I actually just met a gentleman that he explained that not only are living benefits starting to cover long-term care related options, certain companies are actually starting to add Alzheimer's to that option, which is huge. So I bring this all up to say this is an option that somebody can do right now. If you're 35, if you're 40 and you're healthy, heck, I have glaucoma and I still got a life insurance policy that I'm paying $76 a month for a 30-year term that'll give me $750,000. So most people can afford that. And even if you can't afford $76 a month, there are policies where you can pay $30 a month, $40 a month, basically your Netflix bill, basically your phone bill, Starbucks bill per month. And you're good. And you always have the option to change the policy, upgrade, downgrade the policy. There are so many policies that you can take where ultimately you're covered. And that is the goal. I think people forget what life insurance policy is actually for. The life insurance policy, or any insurance policy, is for you to have money coming in when you no longer can make the money. It's there for you and your family, so that if something happens to you or your loved one, you're essentially replacing that income that was lost. So that's the point of a life insurance policy, is to replace your income in the event when you pass away or when you need long-term care, you still have that money coming in. And again, it's totally within most people's striking range of affordability. Mm-hmm. This is not something that we can't afford. We generally can afford it. And if that means we need to make sacrifices like reducing our Starbucks bill, getting rid of HBO Max or one streaming service, you don't need all 6 or 7, we can do that. It's worth it, you guys, to make a little bit of sacrifice so you can start this journey of having insurance so that when the time comes, because listeners, it's going to come. Mm-hmm. That's the unfortunate truth. This is going to happen to you. This is going to happen to your loved one. So you have your options. And I talked about this before. I've done every way. I've done the option where people have been cared for had absolutely no insurance. And I've done the option where people are cared for who have all the insurances. And let me tell you guys, the option where you have the insurance or the option where you have the finances is a lot better than the options when you don't, because we don't want to be the next family who are doing the GoFundMe.
And selling plates.
When we had the option to do this beforehand. I'm getting tired of our people doing that. I'm getting tired of GoFundMes. I've done a GoFundMe. It's not fun. They take a cut of it. People have to agree on certain things. It worked, but it was a mess. I like the option where my dad had a situation. He got his check. That was one of the many things I did not have to worry about. And as a caregiver, you will have to worry about many things. As somebody who's having these discussions, you will have to worry about many factors. And again, I just can't stress this enough. I urge everybody to have this conversation with yourself. And if you have loved ones, if you're blessed to have your parents or grandparents still around, have that conversation with them now or as soon as possible. Because you do not want to have this conversation when, one, they're already sick, or in my situation, where they literally couldn't have the conversation. And that goes into a whole different ball game when they can't have the conversation, when they can't make the decision. Whole different set of hurdles you have to go through. So I urge everybody to, you can follow up with me. You can reach out to me, and I provide education. I do not sell insurance directly. As a planner, I educate people on it and educate them on the options. And then I refer them to somebody I trust who does sell the insurance. But we're here to educate, because our communities still seemingly have misconceptions and are not clearly educated or informed on this, and they need to. This is unfortunately a part of life, and it is what it is. Like, I'm blessed. Like you said earlier, you were honored to take care of your parents. I would do it again. I would absolutely take care of my dad every single time, because my dad was amazing. I loved my dad. He was an excellent father. He deserved that.
Absolutely. And to your point, too, when it comes down to insurance, I always bring up the car insurance. It's not guaranteed that we're going to get in a crash, but we pay car insurance. God willing, it's guaranteed that we're going to age, and it's for sure guaranteed that we're going to die. So now that we know better, we need to do better. Oftentimes, we need to put our ego to the side, and we need to reach out and ask questions. Many people have questions lingering in the back of their minds that they don't want to bring to the forefront because it's a scary conversation. But I've always believed in ugly first. As long as we can get the ugliness out the way, everything else is going to be a little bit easier. So you guys can reach out to me with any questions. I will do a free consultation. If you want to meet for coffee, or you want to do this on Zoom or over the phone, I have no problem sitting down, asking you questions about your loved one, even asking you questions about yourself, and seeing what your options are. You guys can certainly reach out to Darrin. We'll give you our information. But other than that, I just think that being proactive works best. And this is something that we can't turn a blind eye to, because I know it's so many of you guys that are caregivers right now trying to hold down the fort, full-time job, kids, trying to really balance. And we're out here going crazy. But again, now that you guys know that this is an option, don't be scared to ask questions.
Absolutely, guys. And that's a perfect way to end it. Jocelyn, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. This is something that I'm equally as passionate about, and I'm so happy that you're doing this work, especially being Black and Filipino. I've never even seen a Black and Filipino placement specialist, so I'm so glad that someone that represents us, who understands our specific needs and our culture, is there to support as well. Thank you again for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
This is Darrin. This is Financial State of Minds. This is a show where I help you get to that bag, manage that bag, and grow that bag as best as possible as we discuss personal finances and all things money related. You've been listening to us at KGPC 96.9 FM. Thank you guys. Peace, kings and queens. We are out of here.
And thanks for having me.